Okay, well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Australian Electric Vehicle Association's webinar series. This is, I think it's our first for the year. We've certainly got a few more planned this year. We'll probably be running another one in about 6 or 7 weeks with a few themes around charging infrastructure, new vehicles, innovations, that kind of stuff. So please get in touch if you'd like to be involved or sit on a panel on that on the upcoming webinar. It's been quite a successful series when we ran it last year, and we're looking forward to doing more of it this year. So firstly, I'd like to start by acknowledging the Indigenous people on whom we stand on their land. I'm coming to you from Whadjuk Noongar country here in Western Australia. And everyone beaming in from around Australia will be standing on land that was never ceded by the Indigenous people of Australia. They've successfully lived, survived, and thrived for 65,000 years on this continent, which I think is pretty amazing and a testament to sustainability, if ever there was one. A quick little update about what's going on with the association. For those who've been paying attention, the National Electric Vehicle Strategy was released by the federal government after a record, nearly 500 submissions were submitted to the federal government in response to their National EV Strategy call for discussion. They responded with what looks to be a call for more information and more comment. The focus is very much on the fuel efficiency standard, which is good. Very good to see. But they did ask for comment on a whole range of issues, and we certainly provided comment on a whole range of issues, but they only appear to be really focusing extensively on the vehicle emissions standard. So we'll obviously be making a more detailed submission to that on behalf of the association. Don't forget, individuals are welcome to make submissions as well. So please go and visit the federal government's National EV Strategy document. We'll put details up on the website if you want to find them. Perhaps ongoing with that is the AEVA's policy document, manifesto, you might call it. Thank you very much to all of the branch committees who have contributed to that body of work. We've got some really good detailed discussion in there, some really good policy points. We will be publishing that on our website probably next week. And we're going to do a member survey to see which ones our members think are really important, ones which aren't so important, or perhaps better policies or ways of doing it. We're keen to hear. That survey will be up and running probably in the week after. So we're looking forward to your comments on that. Of course, we have the National Conference and EV Expo coming up here in Perth in November 3rd to 5th. We're going to have our conference on the Friday. We've got lots of good buy-in from the West Australian government. We've had lots of support from Synergy, which is the electricity retailer, and the government corporation rolling out the West Australian EV network, all of our fast chargers that are going in through some very remote country. They've been working diligently on that, and we're very excited to have them on board as gold sponsors for the expo. We're also really excited to have representatives from the Norwegian EV Association coming down to Australia to attend the conference too. So we're really looking forward to that. So put that in your diary, and we'll be giving some more updates and letting people know what's coming on ahead of that event, along with other webinars and whatnot coming up. So we should probably launch into our webinar. So this evening, we're very fortunate to have Helene and Sveinung. Yeah, close enough, I'm sorry. Joining us from the Norwegian EV Association. Now, the Norwegian EV Association is a really exciting organisation. They've done some amazing things. They have over 100,000 members, which is, to our knowledge, the largest EV association, drivers or vehicle owners association in the world. So that's really cool to see. And we're really keen to see how their grassroots organisation grew and what they've been up to. So without further ado, I'll throw it over to the Norwegian EV Association.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you for having us as well. Very exciting to log into the webinar today. So we have a few slides that we would like to show. So just sharing screen here, hoping everybody can see. So our names are Helene Busengdal and Sveinung. We are working in the same department in the EV Association, where we do analysis and advisory services. I'm now focused most on our international projects, and Sveinung is our economist who has a very good overview of all the data and statistics, and also a big background from the different ministries in Oslo, or Norway, sorry. And we look forward to presenting some slides and then hopefully having some time for discussion, questions that we could answer. So I'll just hop into today's agenda. We would like to talk about Norway's EV status, policy and development, and our organization, charging and challenges, conclude, and then have a bit of a discussion. So a little bit about the Norwegian Electric Vehicle Association. We are a non-profit NGO. We have 14 local branches today that are run by volunteers. We have an annual congress where the whole organization with volunteers that represent our members come together and decide on what our political program should be and what we should be working on for the next year. We have a board that appoints our Secretary General, and then we have an administration that is appointed by the Secretary General. She put together the administration. And what this looks like today is that we have, as you mentioned, Chris, over 120,000 members that are only EV drivers. We are looking now into expanding our membership to some different companies, but that will be a different sort of membership. And then we are in the administration today, 55 employees. So in 25 years, we've grown quite exponentially the last years, especially with in relation to the EV uptake in our country that we will get more into later. And the organization's goal is to, of course, work for our members, but trying to achieve electrification of transport as fast as possible to the benefit of our climate and environment. So that's kind of our mission that we're working from in our everyday work here at the association. A little bit more about what we do. We help our members. Out of the 55 employees, a lot of them are working directly with membership services, both this help desk where you can call in and ask questions about charging and related topics, membership deals with different services and companies. And then we have a lot of people also working on policy work related to incentives and charging infrastructure especially. We do some research and analysis work. We have a few people doing specifically car testing the different EVs that come into market. And then we do a lot of information work through our web page, which is called Elbil.no. And then we have a large international conference every year called the Nordic EV Summit, where we gather everyone, especially in Europe and the Nordic countries, in the e-mobility atmosphere. And we will actually have one of the board members from AEVA present during the conference, so we're very excited about that as well. Little bit more about our local branches. Like I mentioned, they consist of all volunteers working to spread knowledge and engagement around EVs. They do both social and political events about EVs and EV policy, and they work to influence their local decision makers when that is relevant in different local policy aspects. And the administration, we help the local branches with input and on relevant development and different media opportunities. So this, for you, those of you who don't know, this is the Norwegian map. and our local branches sort of represent our different counties in the country, at least almost. So we have good representation from all across the country. And as you can see, we're a long, thinly spread country, but we checked our map, and this is only halfway from Perth to Sydney. So compared to you guys, it's nothing really. So yeah. Our political program in the organization has a few main goals. One of them is that choosing an EV should always be most favorable if you need a car. We don't want everyone to just buy a car if they don't need a car, but when and if you need a car, it should always be most favorable to choose an EV instead of a combustion engine vehicle. And then we, of course, want it to be easy and effective for everyone to charge at home and also on the road when you go for longer trips. And then a little bit about the role of an EV organization, EV driver organization, and how we kind of see ourselves in this e-mobility sphere. What we are really trying to do is ensure consumer-friendly change, that this transition to electric mobility needs to be consumer-friendly. We want to be a mobilizing and inspiring force, and obviously with the growth that we've had, we are now really able to offer competent help for new EV drivers. And what we are saying is sort of that the technological change to electric cars cannot be handed over to the manufacturers, car companies, and politicians alone. Everyone, of course, has their own agenda. And for us, that is always to work in favor of the EV drivers and what they want. What we do internationally is often we get many requests for sharing the Norwegian experience. So last year we applied to receive some funding from a foundation based in America called ClimateWorks. We got some funding to now be able to answer and travel and cooperate more with sort of sister organizations in different countries. So we're really excited about that and look forward to having closer dialogue and cooperation with other EV associations. And then we wanted to go a little bit into sort of the Norwegian setting of it all. Looking at Norway's new car sales, we've had quite the EV adventure that is really exciting. So here you see our graph, this figure for our new car sales. Now in 2022, we hit 78% market share for all new car sales to be purely battery electric vehicles. When we say EV, we mean just the battery electric vehicles. So the plug-in hybrids are in the ICE, the gray part of the graph. Internal combustion engines. So when we have 79%, it's purely battery electric, and then the plug-in hybrids are making up most of the 21% of the ICE vehicle sales also. So a lot of cars on Norwegian roads with plugs now, so that's quite exciting. And then the government has set a target for 2025 that all new cars that are being sold should be purely battery electric. And we'll get a little bit more into that later. So this is a figure that shows the fleet in Norway. We are, of course, a small country, but with the 620,000 EVs on the roads, we have really been able to sort of pressure test this new technology with e-mobility and the related charging infrastructure. And we also have 180,000, little over that, plug-in hybrids by the end of 2022. So what does this look like in the fleet in Norway? Changing all vehicles, of course, takes time. So when we look at purely battery electric for passenger cars, we're at 20.9% by the end of 2022. So that is quite exciting. It's every fifth car on the road in Norway now is actually a battery electric vehicle. So this is happening fast. And then for vans, we have 4.3. So not as quick development there. And the same goes for buses and definitely for heavy duty transport. it's a long way to go. So from the association side, we have been starting to work a little bit more with vans and heavy duty transport. So that's exciting as well. Buses is something often that the cities or the municipalities kind of take care of in their public procurement processes and that sort of stuff. But we have local policy work on that as well. Okay, so how is this development possible? How has this happened in Norway? That's the main question, right? So going a bit into policy here. As I mentioned, we have this 2025 goal that all new passenger cars and light vans sold in 2025 shall be zero-emission vehicles. And that came as the parliament decision in 2017, and the government actually managed to have a full majority across parties on this decision. So that was really, really exciting, and has of course helped us a lot in our policy work, that this has been something that all parties in the parliament have agreed on, this target. So that is kind of the background for this transition, and a lot more policy is then needed to follow up this goal, and that's kind of been our role, to push the government to then adopt policy that allows this goal to be met. And we really have had quite a lot of good policy on this historically also in Norway, and for kind of going through the EV policy package here, it's been that you have no or lower purchase tax when you buy or lease an EV compared to a combustion engine vehicle. And then historically we've had zero VAT regardless on EVs. Now recently the government has set a new sort of benchmark where they say you get zero VAT up to 45,000 euros, and then you have to pay VAT on the price that exceeds 45,000 euros, which we think is an okay policy now that we really are seeing a 79% market share for new vehicles. It makes sense to start introducing a little bit of these policies again, since we are so far ahead in this transition. And then we've had some support schemes for light commercial vehicles, like smaller vans as well. And then we've had different policy for using the EVs. They had, in the beginning, full exemption in the toll roads. Then they started to have to pay a maximum of 50% of what the ICE vehicle paid. And then now it's been a maximum of 70% of what the combustion engine cars have to pay. But this is a maximum. So all the different municipalities are allowed to decide what target they want to set. So they can decide, even though the maximum is 70%, that in our municipality, we're going to set 30%. So the EVs only have to pay 30% of what the ICE vehicles have to pay. So that's been also quite a successful policy model to keep this incentive in place. And our local branches have been really eager to kind of make sure that these policies stay in place in their municipalities. And then we've had a 50% discount for EVs on ferries. Norway is a long country with a lot of car ferries, so that's also been a nice incentive. And then we've had some discount on public parking. And in the bigger cities, we've had access to bus lanes. They have had to start to remove this now that every fifth car on the road is an EV. So now it's not allowed in rush hour, or you have to have this carpool situation that you need to be more than one person in the car to access the bus lane. So we are seeing policy changes, and this is, you know, a part of our everyday work in the organization, making sure that the government adopts policy that is fact-based and consumer-friendly in this transition. And then internationally, we often get the question like, okay, but we don't have high VAT on car sales, or we don't have this purchase tax on cars, or buying cars or importing cars. So what could be a good model for us? And that's where we really started to discuss and talk about what this all really is about, is taxing what you don't want And then if you would like, you could use the revenue to subsidize what you do want. And in our case, that is taxing the purchase of new polluting cars. And then in Norway, we haven't used the revenue to subsidize EVs, but that is a model that other countries have used, that they can tax the purchase of new polluting cars or the import of new polluting cars, and then use that revenue to subsidize the sales of EVs, because the EVs are still more expensive to produce and make for the manufacturers. So it's all about leveling the playing field and making the EVs competitive on price. That's what we've done in Norway, and that really is how we have managed to come up to this 80% market share for EVs. It's not that the Norwegians are extremely more environmentally friendly than other countries' inhabitants. So it has really been about leveling this this playing field on the price tag for these cars. And then, like you also mentioned, Chris, it's always extremely nice to get this insight into what do the EV drivers want, and what do our members want, and what do they need in their everyday life as EV drivers. And in that regard, we have conducted an EV driver survey since 2012, I think. So that has been a digital questionnaire. We had the last one in April 2022. We are just closing this year's survey, so unfortunately we still have to look at last year's result, but they are interesting as well, I think. And we managed last year to reach out to 16,500 respondents that replied to our survey. So that really is magnificent, and it gives us this huge database of really a lot of relevant insights into the experiences and attitudes of Norwegian EV drivers. And then what do we see? We see that the EV drivers are very, very happy and satisfied with their EV. They don't want to go back. When they've made this transition, they are really happy about it and would like to stay an EV driver. Also, another interesting historical result that we've been able to compare is that when we had this question in 2016, whether they have only EVs or other cars in their household as well. In 2016, 26% of the respondents said that I only have an EV in my household. So that could be one EV or two EVs, but the point is that in your garage, you only have EVs, no petrol or diesel or plug-in hybrids. And then in 2022, we see this development now that we're at 56%. So over half only have an EV in their household. And it's quite common in Norway to have two cars in a household. So this is a transition that we're following closely. And as the cars are getting better, obviously, this is the welcomed development. Also, most common in Norway to live in detached housing. Only 24% live in apartment buildings, and that's usually in the larger city areas. And in relation to that, it's quite common to have access to your own parking spots. So 97% of our respondents say that they have access to their own parking spot. And then 80% of charging is done at home, according to our calculations. That being the main source of a vehicle charging for Norwegian EV drivers. And on that note, going a little into charging. In our survey, we also ask how often you charge at public normal charging stations or at home. And this figure is a little bit chaotic, but the purple is supposed to represent if you reply that you charge at home or at public normal charging stations daily. The orange is every 2 to 3 days, green weekly, the light green monthly, less than monthly, and never. And there we see that most, again, you often do your charging at home. And a development that has been quite interesting is that in the beginning, very many EV drivers in our survey said that they had to charge their car daily. So the purple line was a lot longer, but now we see that more and more of the EV drivers say that it's only necessary 2 or 3 days every 2 or 3 days or weekly. So that's a good development as well. And then if we sort of filter this result down to our larger cities, there's a lot more public normal charging going on weekly, because you don't necessarily have access to your own private parking spot at home in the larger cities. This is also a very interesting development that we've seen. In the beginning, when we had this survey, only 13% of the EV drivers in 2015 said that they used a charging box at home to charge their vehicle. In 2022, this is now at 83%. It's the new normal, which is good due to, you know, fire safety in your house and electricity systems in your house. So this is a development we're quite happy about also. And then over to fast charging, because we know that the home charging or the charging where you live, that's the main source of your regular charging. But then we know that we need to have a network of fast charging so that you are able to use your EV as the only car in your household going on longer trips, not just driving at short distances in a city or something like that. You need it. At least in Norway, we like to go to our cabins or up in the mountains, go for what do you say, a car holiday, that you have this road trip. So fast charging is necessary. But it's not used that often. We also ask EV drivers how often they use fast charging, and 51% say that they use it less than monthly, and then 31% monthly. And this makes sense. So compared to the home charging, where you kind of have to have almost one charger per vehicle, for fast charging, you need a lot less than that, because it's not an infrastructure that is going to be used daily or weekly, and not even monthly by most EV drivers, according to our statistics. So, yeah. So then going a little bit into this development in Norway, as we said, we get more and more vehicles on the road every year, and how are we going to meet this demand for this infrastructure? And we often are asked, what did you do with public funding? Like, how did you manage to get this infrastructure in place? What we did several years ago is that we have some public tenders for an initial network of fast charging stations across Norway. Again, our country is very long and spread out, so securing this network so that we are able to connect sort of the south of Norway with the north of Norway, that has been sort of a task for our government and our politicians, just to make sure that this infrastructure is really just a basic network put in place. But then the development after that, and as the sales have really taken off, we are seeing that it's a good market case for the companies now. So they are building this infrastructure where it's supply and demand for charging, and so this is now taken over by the market. But the first initial network was fast charging stations every 50 kilometers on all main roads in Norway. The tenders instructed to build smaller stations, so just 2 50 kilowatt plugs and then one AC type 2 connector. And then we had it mostly finished by the end of 2017, but we needed an extra support scheme for our county all the way up north in Finnmark. So we needed some extra public tenders for building out the infrastructure there as well. And then in 2021, we also had a little support scheme for some rural areas where we saw that we had a lack of infrastructure. Also to be able to kind of ease or spread the capacity around very popular destinations, we suggested to the government that they build some stations in rural areas where people drive a lot but doesn't necessarily stay for longer periods of time. Yeah, so in total, I think we often say that we've spent 35 million euros from the government in total for our initial network of fast charging. So I think we often see that that's a lot less than what people kind of think beforehand. That is the case. And then another figure with a lot of different information, but this is trying to kind of show the development in Norway. That in the beginning we had very little fast charging. The blue bars are the number of fast chargers, and then the light green are the number for high power charging. And then this orange line is showing the development of how many EVs in Norway we have per fast charger. And that development has gone the right way. The orange line is going down, so we get more chargers per EV, even though we sell a lot of EVs every year. And what our analysis show is that to be around 110 EVs per fast chargers is actually a good place to be. So we get some peaks during holidays, like when people travel home for Christmas or up in the mountains for Easter break. We get some destinations that have a little short of capacity, but what we are kind of saying in our dialogue with the industry, that we agree that we can't really build a network to meet those very, very high peaks sometimes during the year. We need to build a good and varied network that kind of fits the need in more on a monthly basis. So we are at around, is it 6,000, a little less than 6,000 fast chargers today. This is including the Tesla chargers, which initially were closed but are now opened in Norway and Europe, most of the stations at least. So that's a good development. And yeah, so that's good. But we do have some challenges still in our country related to charging. We see in our survey, where we also ask how the EV drivers feel around charging, that 51% experience charging queues occasionally or more often. So this is sort of a topic for dialogue with the industry continuously from our side as an EV association, making them build charging in locations that we know the EV drivers want charging, where they see that they travel a lot. We are seeing a development in Norway that a lot more gas stations are now starting to construct charging on their sites, which is a good development, because as a driver, you see the gas station and you're used to, before you made the transition to EV, to know that that's a place where I could fill up my car. And now that the gas stations are doing that, this is the case also for EV drivers, so that's good. Another thing that we see is that this is still new technology. So in our survey last year, 50% of the EV drivers say that they experience that the fast chargers don't work occasionally or more often. And this is something that we also say to the industry, that they need to make sure that this doesn't happen at this high scale. This is not the percentage we would like to be at. We want this to be a lot lower, and unfortunately, we haven't seen a better change in this situation. In 2021, our survey also said that 47% or something, so it hasn't gone down. But again, we know that COVID made problems for the supply chains for this industry, so that might have been the case. We're excited to see this year's result, to see that hopefully we've had a bettering of the situation. Another problem we've had in Norway is that the EV drivers find charging a bit difficult. We have a lot of different payment solutions for charging. So in our survey, 3 out of 4 say that they find the number of charging operators and apps complicated, and that 71% want card payment for charging, because this is something that we haven't had in Norway. We've had the QR codes, or we've had the applications. You have to download the app, register your card to access the charging stations. And we have been really, as an association, working with this, because we know this is the situation that the EV drivers don't like. And the industry, of course, want to own their customer, so that they know that they come back to their station and not a competitor station. But having card payment on really essential infrastructure that charging is, if you are taking your EV for a long drive, is something that we have been working politically with. So we actually managed to win last year, that we made sure the government made a national charging strategy where they made card payment for fast charging mandatory. So this is our Secretary General together with the Minister for Transportation in the picture. And they've said, okay, the charging companies need to put in card payment solutions for new fast charging stations this year after summer. And then they have to do a retrofit by, is it 2026? Or haven't they maybe decided exactly on the year? Yeah, but it's a little bit better than what the EU is putting in place, and we're always excited about that, of course, in Norway. And then we also made it mandatory that they need to have price information at their stations, because this hasn't really been the case so far either. This has been something that has been inside the app, or maybe not even inside the app of the charging company. So this is really something that has been on our agenda for the last years. And then since we are with the expected EV growth, we say that we do need more chargers every year. So our analysis show that we need a little over 9,000 fast chargers by the end of 2025. So now we're at almost 6,000, but we need to have 3,000. We are a lot more positive that this will happen now than we were 3 years ago. We didn't think this would be manageable, but now we are really seeing that it's a good market case for the companies. So they are really constructing a lot of charging stations. So that's exciting. So then to summarize, what we really say is, you know, make EVs competitive on price, then you can have more of this development that we have seen in Norway. And from our side, we think the purchase incentives have been sort of the top success factor for the Norwegian case. And then luckily we are on track in Norway for our 2025 target of only selling zero-emission vehicles. So that's very exciting. And charging is doable, and the EV drivers are happy. So that is the slides that we had for you today. I will stop sharing my screen now. There you go.
Wow, well, thank you very much. That's fascinating insight, and really great to see so much progress in such a short period of time. I guess the sort of thing that popped out to me was that your government implemented a strategy to effectively outlaw the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles by 2025.
That was, yeah, I should have specified that more, because what we think are really exciting about our law is that the government didn't say that it's illegal to buy or sell combustion engine vehicles in 2025 and after, only that their goal is that it should really just be EVs that are being sold from 2025. And that has made also from our side the opportunity to say, okay, if that's the case, you need to make the policy that backs that goal favorable for the consumers. So it's not a ban on fossil fuel cars, but sort of this motivating, incentivizing target to see this.
As you say, you're effectively making the choice to buy an EV the easier decision. Yeah, no, that's really good. Fantastic. Well, there are a few questions back here. I'll just skip back to the to some questions as they appeared. Sally asked, is there existing ICE motoring associations? And if so, are they trying to take over your role? Because we're finding here that existing motoring associations are now finally trying to pitch themselves as the EV experts, but they quite literally come to the AEVA for advice. Yeah, how'd that go?
Yeah, do you want to tell a little bit about that story? Because we definitely have competition.
Yeah. I think the competition is becoming quite fierce now because they are really trying to get EV owners to join the traditional ICE association. But they, of course, they have problems with their message because they still also want to serve all the petrol and diesel owners. While we can say that we are both an EV association, a car association, but also an environmental organization, and they can do that. So they're in they have to convey different messages, and that's a bit difficult for them. And also, most of their active members, because they're a member organization as well as us, are typically petrol heads who are showing up on the member meetings, etc. While our members are, the pioneers, the environmentalists. So I think it's quite obvious from the outside that we are more of an environmental organization, but also that we know electric vehicles better than the traditional motoring association. But I think we also have a challenge that quite many people haven't heard about us. So they only think it's one organization existing, and they go to that organization and say that we have bought an EV, can you also help us with that? But we've seen that they have increased their level of expertise. They never come to us for advice anymore. But we have some, I think you could say, quarrels in the media, where we are trying to convince people that we know what is best for EV drivers. So it's a kind of a fierce competition right now.
Yeah,
Still we know the most.
I'm not sure we've hit that point yet, but I dare say we might get there quite soon. We've certainly put forward different positions to the industry council as well, and not in any competitive way, but in a way that definitely suits the end user and the consumer, perhaps more than the industry, which is really quite important. There was another question there about home charging, but I think it was answered in the presentation. You had 25% of people who can't charge at home. If I remember that stat correctly, there were quite a few there.
We have 25% living in apartment buildings, but
that's right, yes.
Some apartment buildings have parking spaces. But we have this legislation actually in Norway that as a resident in an apartment building, the board of a co-op or apartment building residency, they can't deny you your right to charge. So if you want to install your charger at your parking space in the apartment building, you're allowed to. So
that sounds delightful.
We spent some time to get this written into the law.
Well done, well done. We have body corporates who make everything difficult at every opportunity. So yeah, that's a common occurrence. So yes, by the way, we will be putting this up on YouTube, so you can find the presentation later on. So there's a question here about, is there already a significant market for used EVs in Norway? If you jump on Craigslist or Gumtree or whatever the cheap and cheerful secondhand equivalent is, how many EVs will you find?
I think it's if you look at the used market, it's similar to the general car stock. So even if we have 80% of new sales, it's only 20% of the total fleet which are electric. But what we also see that number in the used statistics, that 20% are battery electric now. So the used market is getting quite big.
Fantastic.
Because what do we say is the common? It's car ownership in Norway. It usually changes around 7 or every 7-8 years. Is that the?
I think it's more like every 5 years you change your car.
Yeah, I think we hold onto our vehicles for about 10 or 11 years on average, but the conditions aren't nearly as brutal on vehicles as they are in the north.
Yeah.
A good question here. We often get this one. Have you noticed any significant change or impact on the electricity grid with all of these EVs charging? I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you guys.
Well, I think it's that's an easy answer here. We produce, I think, I don't know if you're into these numbers, but it's 150 terawatt hours of electricity in Norway, and only around 1 to 1.5 terawatt hours, so less than 1%, is being used for EVs. So, and also I think a nice feature of being an EV owner and having your own parking spot with a charging box is that it's most convenient to charge your car at night. So even if it's also good for your wallet, because electricity is a little cheaper, it can be much cheaper in the night actually. But the most convenient way to charge is just to put it on, connect it in the evening and put it out when you're ready to use it next morning. And you're typically then you're fully charged.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Your garage.
In Australia, the preferred time to be charging your vehicle is during the middle of the day, because we have an absolute abundance of solar energy, and so our grid network operators are actually quite keen for people to really load up the grid in the middle of the day, to sort of balance out that the duck curve, as we call it. Where demand in the middle of the day is dropped, but obviously EVs charging off sunshine is a great way to use that energy, and workplace charging is going to be a major component of that. Another question here, does the Norwegian EV Association take on any positions on advocacy of autonomous vehicles or driving systems?
Well, we haven't really had any strong opinions on that. We know a lot about it, but it seems like it's going to be many years ahead still. So I think when autonomous vehicles will be starting to be used, I think it's mostly as a taxi service. For local traffic, what you typically did with a taxi before, you can do with an autonomous vehicle, but it's still costly to operate and to buy. So it doesn't really make sense yet to have any strong policies. What is good about autonomous vehicles is that they are much easier to make with an electrical powertrain. So because you need this instant connection to the computer, and you don't get that with a combustion engine. So it's positive, of course, for electric vehicles. But already next year in Oslo, all taxis here will be battery electric by the politician regulation. They decided that 4 years ago, that from November 2024, all taxis in Oslo will be battery electric.
Wow, well, that's great. That's great.
So we don't need autonomous vehicles to get zero emissions.
You got paid staff. That's great. Here's a good question that's certainly relevant to our association too. If you become a member of the Norwegian EV Association, what value-added services are available to members?
So we have what do you say, a big variation, really. Everything from purchasing different products in an Apple store to really having good insurance deals on EVs. So we have, as we've grown to a bigger organization, a department that works on membership deals. But what has been mostly popular, I think, is our charging roaming solution that we have. And so we have this RFID tag that you can use on almost half of the charging stations in Norway, because we are really quarreling with the charging industry to allow us to have roaming access to all of their charging stations. And now at least we're going to have credit card payment, so it's going to be accessible to all. But we've tried to do this roaming solution as sort of one other option to having all these different apps and that sort of stuff. But this is always in development, and quite recently we launched what do you call it, verksted, so Bilextra.
Repair shop, auto repair shop,
Yeah.
Parts and things, stuff for cars.
To get benefits and rebates and that sort of stuff, which is quite popular too. And towing service is also part of our membership. That if you, but that's to say, we are not seeing a higher rate of need for towing of battery electric vehicles than we are for petrol and diesel cars. So it's not the EV phenomenon that some people often say, but it's always nice to have as part of your membership with an association, especially in Norway. It's quite popular.
I think this is quite important for you actually, and us of course, that EVs are easier to are cheaper to operate and to give this road service guarantees. So our fee is cheaper than the traditional ICE motorist organization, because it's more costly to give road services to ICE cars. And of course, this is mostly because EVs are new. And so that's a window of opportunity to give cheaper services, a cheaper price for membership right now, and for many years ahead as well.
Cool. Well, there's a few more questions. I'm going to skip past a few questions, and I will actually try and get a screenshot of these questions, and hopefully we can get an answer in, a little bit later on. Take them on notice, as we say. I think there's a good question here from John Smith. What actions have been taken to ensure that charging infrastructure is accessible to people with disabilities? And are there standards for the design and construction of EV chargers to allow people, say, in a wheelchair to move around the charge point?
Oh, yeah, this has been a little bit of a struggle. I think when people ask us in different countries, like, what would you not do again if you had the chance? I think put in place some more regulations for our initial charging infrastructure network would be a good idea, like inclusive payment solutions like roaming or card payments, and also this with the standardization for accessibility for everyone, really. This is a law we've had in Norway, but it hasn't really in some way applied to this new technology of charging stations. So it has really been a struggle. But we are now actually working with a standardization, government program that is in charge of making these standards that companies have to follow to map out what this really should contain. But we have tried historically also to influence the companies to construct larger stations, so there's just literally more space to park your car and get in and out of your car, because that's been a struggle, and also to avoid these extremely heavy plugs, because they are, I mean, it's difficult for many people because they're quite heavy and sometimes a little bit stuck in the charger, and so we are really trying to push the industry to be more innovative in that sense, to construct more user-friendly infrastructure, like the hardware producers, but also make sure that the technology is accessible to everyone on station.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we're trying to get chargers full stop, let alone ones that are easy to get the plug out. Let alone ones that reliably work. It was interesting to see the statistic on unreliable charges that you had. It doesn't it does seem better than our figures. I think our figures are up probably around about 70 or 80% at the moment. But it's still, yeah, it's a major frustration for a lot of our members.
Yeah. And I think, you know, now it's easy for me to say that if we were to do it all over again, we would just do this and this and this, because as you say, like, we really in the beginning, we were very, you know, grateful for the expansion of this infrastructure. But when we started to construct these stations, the technology was a lot newer. Now it should be more mature to be able to come into the market and just from the beginning make great solutions, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I saw a question about dealerships, and I think I just wanted to share that, because in the beginning, the car dealers, they were quite skeptical to EVs. But of course, when you are selling 80% only EVs and even more, they're not skeptical anymore. So they're advocating. And also, one company that imports Volkswagen, they're saying that they will not sell any ICE Volkswagen from 1st of January 2024. So they're actually even more ambitious than the government. And also we know that they're not importing any cars to put in their showrooms this year. The only ICE cars they will sell in 2023 are cars that they are, if they get orders, they will ship them from Germany. They won't have any in their showrooms.
Wow.
So they're only selling out this year, what they have in the showrooms of ICE cars, and they're saying you'll get them really cheap.
Almost
so
giving
them
them
anymore. They don't want them anymore.
Yeah. Oh, that's an exciting future, and we look forward to that, reaching that point soon. That'll be awesome. I will just go to one last question from Warwick there about electric trucks and heavy vehicles. We've got quite an exciting company here that's developing a hot swapping system for heavy vehicles, large articulated heavy vehicles, Janus Electric. Is Norway doing similar things with heavy vehicles, trucks and lorries?
Not battery swapping technology, I think. No.
I think we have a regulation which says that truck drivers, they have to have a 1 hour pause every 4 hours. So, and we have done some calculation on this, and will typically be enough for getting their cars charged, even with the CCS technology. With like 350 kilowatts, you get a lot.
Yeah.
But with the megawatt charging system on its way, we believe it will be even less of a problem. And we also see that the truck companies, they're just building in bigger batteries to cope for the long ranges. But I think a lot of the regulation towards that you need rest as a driver is enough to get the trucks charged.
Yeah.
Also, pulling from the experience with the EVs on this technology, I think one of the biggest hurdles would be to get the manufacturers of the vehicles to agree on such a standard to sort of allow this. In the beginning, you know, we had CCS and CHAdeMO, they wouldn't even agree on what you're supposed to plug into your car. So yeah.
And the is there a lot of interest in retrofitting diesel trucks to electric drive? Is there a conversion scene happening over there?
Well, typically when you have been ordering a truck, electric truck, there's a company in the Netherlands. They buy a Volvo or a MAN truck. They just take out the diesel engine and replace it with the electric engine and mount batteries on it. And this makes the trucks quite costly. But now we're seeing Volvo, Scania, MAN, they are making production lines for entirely EV trucks.
Yeah. I think it's funny. I mean, our association has been involved with helping people convert cars to electric for the last 50 years, because up until very recently, that was the only way you could get an EV if you wanted one. And of course, Norway had the famous story about the electric panda, which we all love. So I think electric heavy vehicles are sort of further down the road. So yeah, it's I think we do what we need to do. Is it make do and make better?
Yeah.
So I think it's been an hour, so I think we should wrap the meeting up here. Thank you very much for coming online and having a chat with us about your experience. There's so much to learn. Really good questions coming through too. So I'll try and grab them as best I can, and we'll put them up, put the answers to them up on the YouTube channel when we can. So I think we all agree it was a fantastic demonstration from what's been going on up in the far north, and we look forward to having Michael grace you guys with his presence and sharing the Australian experience with you guys at the Nordic EV Summit.
Likewise, thank you so much for having us, Chris.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.